Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Bradburn. Alongside me is Logan Camden, and today we are joined by a very special guest. We've got Anthony Lawson with us today to talk some ball, and we are going to do just that. But before we get into it, Anthony, how are we doing today? First time on the show. We're very happy to have you.
I'm doing fantastic. I'm thrilled to be here. Great week of football, great opening week. I feel like there's so much to talk about. I can't wait to get through it all with y'all.
There is, and we're going to do our best to sort of make sense of and parse through all of the crazy stuff that always happens in week one. And people like to call it Overreaction Monday, or at this point, Overreaction Tuesday. So our theme of the episode today is going to be taking on some of these big storylines of week one and trying to figure out, do we think this is real or do we think this is fake? And first, we'll talk about the Monday Night Football game because we haven't had a chance to give our thoughts on that one yet. And there was a lot of new information that we got in that one because we've got two very young quarterbacks, J.J. McCarthy making his first career start, Caleb Williams making his first start, of course, under Ben Johnson, now new head coach there. And it ends up being J.J. and the Vikes who come surging back after starting the fourth quarter facing a 17-6 deficit. So, Anthony, we'll start with you. What did you just make of and take away from J.J.'s debut as a starter last night?
I thought he looked fantastic, and I think the big takeaway I had, it was a kind of reaffirming of priors, which was, at least for me, all offseason long, I did a lot of Vikings praise and said that this was a really optimal environment for a quarterback to have their first career start in. I was really hyped about the offensive line, about, of course, Justin Jefferson and the receivers, and then you really can't say enough about Brian Flores and that defense. And it got to a point in the offseason where, everybody, they get bored of the narratives and they start to, look back and see if we're dragging anything or, saying one thing too often. And I think people started to pivot on the Vikings right at the end. And they started to say, well, this is a guy who's starting his first ever game. We never know how that's going to go. Rookie quarterbacks are a toss-up. Are you guys giving the Vikings too much credit? Are you glazing? Something like that. And I think I felt pretty reaffirmed yesterday in saying, no, it was pretty warranted because this team, there was a chart from, I think his name is Ben Baldwin, Computer Cowboy, Twitter. They were mapping out, pass protection, success rate, that sort of stuff. Even without Christian Darrisaw, the Vikings' offensive line was fantastic last night. They looked really good. They looked really solid. And as we know, that's the floor raiser for rookie QBs. Brian Flores, he looked remarkable in the game. The receivers did their thing, and that's why the Vikings won, because this is a well-assembled team, even for a rookie quarterback. That was my big prior reaffirming takeaway that I had first and foremost.
Well said. I think that this was setting up to be one of the worst quarterback debuts in a long time. It was ugly through three quarters. A bunch of 3-and-outs, a bunch of bad sacks on third down from JJ. But the one word I would use to describe his start is resilient. I thought it felt like a pressure cooker out of that third quarter. The 3rd and 18, Kevin O'Connell calls a halfback draw. To me, that tells you everything you need to know about what KOC was thinking in that moment, but what a bounce back. Big plays JJ's making with his feet, that scrambling touchdown at the end, made some big throws to Justin Jefferson late in this game. He bounced back in a big way, and I think that infrastructure is a big part of it. You said it, dude. Sam Darnold had the best year of his career last year behind this line with this all these great skill position weapons around him, and I think the Vikings may be poised to be even better this year. I think the team around the quarterback position is better than last year. With the introduction of Jordan Mason as the bell cow back, Aaron Jones, maybe could extend him, maybe make him even more effective in the receiving game with less touches. Brian Flores, as you mentioned, dialed up the pressure in a big way. I thought did a great job of bringing 5 and 6 guys, really cranking it up on Caleb. Caleb was really comfortable early on in this game. And so I'm not going to lie to you, I was real nervous through three quarters, but I thought the Vikings and JJ were really resilient in this one and answered the call. On the flip side, a pretty bad collapse for Chicago.
Definitely. It was a very up and down debut for JJ, but he ended up. He finished strong, and I think that is where I give him the most credit for this performance. When you are not a literal rookie quarterback, but effectively, right? These are his first NFL snaps in an actual regular season game. And you come out of the gate struggling to the extent that he was, where it wasn't just like once the play starts, procedural issues, right? Multiple delay of game penalties, and just then seeming totally overwhelmed once the ball was in play and taking, as you mentioned, Logan, a couple of bad third down sacks. 7 of the Vikings' first 9 drives, which took them through the first 3 quarters of this football game, were 3 and outs or the pick 6. So through 3 quarters, the Minnesota offense had literally given the Bears more points than they had actually scored. They'd given the Bears 7, they'd only put up 6. And like, this is not even your normal 6 points through 3 quarters, which is always going to be ugly. But when 78% of the time you are immediately giving the ball back to the defense, like you can't get anything going, you can't get a single first down, like it was broken. And I was really concerned. Like I tweeted out, this is as bad as it basically could be, because my expectation was this is one of the best situations we've like ever seen a rookie quarterback dropped into. Again, rookie in quotes, but to have this level of offensive infrastructure, this sort of brilliant play calling from KOC, this sort of elite wide receiver talent. Now, Jordan Addison isn't out there yet, but still, obviously Jettas, and I think later on in the year, this will be a stacked receiving core. Offensive line, missing Darisaw today, but still an improved offensive line that beefed up from last year. Like, there are so many things in place to put a quarterback in a position to succeed, a young quarterback especially. And then you add on top that this was a top 5 defense last year that also added talent. And you look at the whole picture and it's like, this team won 14 games and they improved the roster. The question is going to be the quarterback play. And the quarterback play was inhibitively bad for 3 quarters of this football game. It was holding them back actively, but he hung in there, man. And to be able to keep that level of poise as a dude who was in this spot for the first time in the NFL, like that alone is impressive. Down the stretch, completes 5 of his last 6 passes, 2 passing touchdowns in that stretch, 1 rushing touchdown. I love the call to use his legs on 3rd and 1. I think that's going to be something of a crutch for him to lean on early in his career, that mobility, especially in some of those short yardage situations. And it's not like he's doing a lot of stuff in terms of negating pressure, evading pass rushers, right? Creating out of structure. Really, none of that. Only like 1 or 2 real tight window throws in this game where he put some zip on it. But that's not what is expected of J.J. McCarthy here. And for the most part, that's not what's going to be needed of him to get this team to the level where they're in the playoffs or they could win a playoff game. So how good at football is J.J. McCarthy going to be? I don't feel like I can confidently say, because this was such a bipolar performance from him, and it's his debut performance either way. You don't want to take away too much. But what I do feel confident in is that as a competitor, as a leader, this kid is impressive. And you saw that on the field. You see that in the post game. He's got a psychotic energy about him. And like, I don't want to get too much into the intangible stuff, but I also don't want to pretend that that doesn't matter. There are a lot of quarterbacks. You put Ryan Leaf in this situation, no hate, and he plays like that for 3 quarters. He's melting down in the 4th. The game's over. JJ was resilient. You said it, Logan. That's the word.
I don't think you have to look at like even other like big time busts. I think you can look at Sam Darnold and Kirk Cousins, and like Sam Darnold had a phenomenal year last year. I don't want to take anything away from him, but Darnold is one of those guys who is prone to these kind of meltdowns. Kirk Cousins, a former Vikings quarterback, prone to these kind of meltdowns. I really like JJ's mental toughness, and I thought that was on display. And like you said, man, like Aikman said it throughout the end of the 4th quarter, JJ earned a lot of respect from guys in that locker room. Like, to bounce back like that, it's easy to put your head down, to crumble. They didn't do that. So I thought that was super impressive from him. And I'm ultimately, I don't know about you guys, I'm encouraged. I'll hand up. I didn't know if JJ was going to be cut out for the league. And like you said, I don't want to make any big definitive claims, but I was expecting a historic collapse from the Vikings. I thought they were going to be on the canvas and knocked out throughout the 4th quarter.
You did predict the biggest fall off of any NFL team from the Vikings this year. That was one of your takes.
The people you were talking about, Anthony, that were skeptical, that was me. I was that guy.
Yeah, we got one right here on the pod.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys know Seth Wickersham, the author. He wrote a book about the Patriots a while ago.
Unfortunately, but I'm sure
recently.
He writes great stuff.
So even if you don't read, he was on Pablo Torre, his podcast recently. And it was a fascinating episode all about quarterbacks, because that's his new book. Also, I apologize for the siren outside of my window right now. It's going crazy.
Do you have a hard out? Are they coming in for you in a few minutes? Because we can.
They might be.
The
You never know.
All right.
But so Seth Wickersham, he wrote this book about quarterbacks, and he was on Pablo Torre, and he was talking all about the psychology of who you have to be as a person to be a quarterback, what kind of person you have to be, what kind of environment you have to be, almost like an anthropological analysis of like what quarterbacks mean to like a community. And then like if you're good enough to go up to the college level, what that means for that region or whatever, that sort of thing. And one of the fascinating things that Wickersham mentioned that I really retained was that one thing that you know for sure about quarterbacks, regardless of who they are and what level they're playing at, is that they cannot lose their confidence. You just can't do it. You have to find a way in here, in your head, and it can vary quarterback to quarterback, to not lose that trust in yourself no matter what, because there is so much that can go wrong in a game. You have to focus on what you can control and to nothing else. And Wickersham, he talked about, all these different quarterbacks and how they do it. He compared Tom Brady in his first ever Super Bowl. He took a nap in the locker room because he felt like he had nothing to prove. That was his confidence. But by his final Super Bowl, he could not fall asleep the night before because the confidence, it just kind of changed his approach to that stuff, his standard, all of it changed, but you still have to find the confidence. He talked about Joe Burrow. I thought this was fascinating. I watched the quarterback show this summer. I felt like Burrow was almost like vacant of emotion a lot of the time. He looks really monotone all the time. He rarely expresses himself. Wickersham specifically referred to Burrow and said that his way to keep his confidence in himself, and this sounds like a very Bengals way to do it if you ask me, a quarterback that plays for the Bengals that is to say, a lot of stuff's going to go wrong, and that's just not my problem. He just doesn't feel those frustrations on game day, unless you're playing the Titans. We all remember how he lashed out in that one. But that's Burrow's thing. And for McCarthy, the thing that really resonates with me after last night's game, I don't know if you guys saw this, it was like this quote that's been plastered everywhere. Apparently, when he was in the huddle late in the game, I think they were trailing, he just turned to his guys, he said, "Where else would you guys rather be right now?" He's got that love of the game, that swagger, that confidence in him. You can always see it. We've seen it prior to the season. He's a quirky guy. He's always meditating, finding that inner peace. He's got the Aaron Rodgers confidence, I dare say. But it works. It clearly is a confidence that's there. And that's something you need in these quarterbacks from a young age. You need to see that, to have that trust in them. And JJ, in this environment with that confidence in himself, it's just got me really hyped up because, you never want to overreact to just one game in a very long season, a very long career, but it feels like a good omen. It really does. That's where I stand.
Yeah, I've become pretty mental toughness pilled in sports. I think that sometimes we underrate, first of all, how impressive it is from all of the elite guys, because pretty much all of the elite guys out there are extremely mentally tough. But sometimes people try to distill it down to, whoever wants it more, and absolutely being a great competitor, right? Never dying, never losing your competitive spirit. That's part of elite mental toughness. But you have to walk this line of wanting it so badly and yet proceeding as usual, right? Not letting the pressure of the moment, the fact that you do want this more than anything, disrupt your ability to still proceed as if this were any other play and execute with the same precision and just proceed as usual. And I thought that that's exactly what JJ was able to do. I mean, he went from looking overwhelmed to looking calmer somehow as things got harder. And I do think that that's a testament definitely to some just fortitude there mentally. So I do think it's realistic to expect up and down quarterback play from JJ at this point, just because I did think, in terms of the actual football stuff that we saw, right? He is someone who's lacking those upper echelon physical traits, but also, in terms of the game management, the processing, the decision making, it was rough for a while. That pick six was awful. That's one of the worst throws that we've seen in the first week of the NFL season, and I don't know that that's all just immediately going to be eliminated from his game because he played a really good fourth quarter. But the fact that he did play that really good fourth quarter means something. The infrastructure is great. So overall, I thought the Vikings were going to be like a 10-win wild card team. I thought this is a great roster. I am still worried about the consistency of the quarterback play compared to last year. I think Darnold, although he has his flaws, really did a pretty impressive job, at least until, his big flaws got exposed and he got sacked a million times over the last 2 games of the season. I'm not expecting that level from JJ throughout the year, so I don't know if I can expect that level from the Vikings, but played a good football game, got a win under some difficult circumstances. How about on the other side of this? Logan, Caleb Williams, year 2, first game under Ben Johnson. They've got this big lead for 3 quarters. Their defense gives them a touchdown, and they end up losing. What did you make of his performance?
You guys tell me if I'm out of pocket with this one. Like, don't get me wrong, and I want to be clear about something. I thought this was an up and down game for Caleb. Like, I thought there were some really, really high highs in this game. Some of the stuff he was doing with his legs, the first drive out of the gates, I thought was super impressive. The final drive, like, some of the ball placement was absolutely phenomenal. It kind of reminded me of, like, watching Josh Allen, like, settle in a little bit. Like, it reminds me of a wild Bronco, like a horse being broken in for the first time. Like, he's got all these physical tools, and it is all on display in this game. The creation with the legs, the arm strength. One of those throws on the final drive. McCarthy can throw bullets. Caleb Williams can throw missiles and rockets. Like, he has got that A1 kind of quarterback arm, and obviously that's why he went number 1 overall. It was the arm angles. It was the velocity, the pop. Caleb throws one of the hardest balls. Like, it looks like Andrew Luck almost. Like, if I had to compare it to a quarterback, and Luck is one of the hardest of all time. But the Komet one-handed snag, that was the Caleb rocket ball. The really bad miss is obviously the DJ Moore shot up the sideline where he just misses him late. He needs to get that ball out a little bit earlier, and he needs to. They need to be better on third down. They went 1-11 on third down after starting 2 of 2. And they kind of got bailed out at the end of the game with some unfortunate Vikings penalties. Those were just unnecessary. I thought that was bad by the Vikings defense. But Caleb's got all the tools there, and I thought it was an encouraging game, especially with what he did with his legs and how much better the offensive line did look for most of this game. Now, when they brought extra pressure, I thought you saw some of the pitfalls, but they are improved. This team allowed the third most sacks by any team in the Super Bowl era last season with 68. They added 3 really good interior offensive linemen, so I think the line's going to look better. And I think Caleb is inevitably going to be a top 10 quarterback in this league. Like, I compare what Ben Johnson was working with and a guy like Jared Goff and some of his limitations, like being a statue, not being super mobile. Caleb's got all the tools, and I think it's only a matter of time until he figures it out. I just don't know how consistent it's going to be this year. So I liked all the flashes that we got in this game, and that's why I give it a... He's got these A1 physical traits that make me bank on this guy being a top 5, top 10 kind of quarterback. It's just when to me. I don't know if it's going to be this season because as high as the highs were, I thought some of the accuracy issues were bad at some times, some of the jitteriness. I just don't know if it's all going to come together to where he's a top 10 guy this season, but I'm bought in. I still think Caleb's going to be a superstar one day, and I think he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in football. I just think it's going to take some time.
Anthony, what did you take away from Caleb's debut this season?
It's a good question. I mean, I thought Logan made a good point about Caleb Williams being a little raw, looking a little raw, kind of reminding you of like an early Josh Allen or something like that. And I think that kind of speaks to the problem, first and foremost, which is this guy, when he came out, I mean, he was billed as this can't-miss, very polished, pro-ready. Maybe he's got a bit of improviser in him, but that's good in the modern NFL, right? All of that. And the one thing we knew for sure is that this guy's arm is live. It's one of the best in football. And I agree with you, Logan. We saw a lot of that in the game yesterday, but the issue was that he also had a lot of like weird misses to the flats. That was a problem. In the modern NFL, a really important thing that a quarterback's got to be able to do consistently is rip that ball over the middle of the field. I've often called that like the three-pointer of the NFL. It's imperative for spacing and all that. Watching the game back, I thought Caleb had a couple missed opportunities there. A lot of that, I think, ties into his height, which was really on display, I thought, because one, the Vikings, that's a great defense. They blitzed on 55% of their second half, Caleb dropbacks and all of that. Two, the Bears' offensive line, it's pretty new, right? You can say what you want about the talent. I think it's probably too early to comment on it fully. But there was a lot of pressure in Caleb's face, and he's just not... This is the thing that I think separates him from like a Josh Allen of it all. He's just not tall enough and built that way. He doesn't have that archetype where he can just stand in the face of pressure the same way. His instinct, it's a Mahomes instinct. It's like a Cam Ward-ish instinct. So by no means is it bad. Lots of quarterbacks have this. But it's to get out and extend the play beyond the pocket and all of that. And yesterday, that just didn't quite work. And a lot of the stuff that in a Ben Johnson offense, you would think it works, like those digs over the middle or whatever. They just weren't there as consistently as I'm sure Bears fans would have liked to see, which is why, I mean, at least for me, my information environment, they were losing their minds on social media after the game. They could not believe this one slipped away. And so I was trying to grapple with all this, right, because I thought Caleb looked promising like you did, Logan, but of course, this is the most Bears outcome ever, so their fans are frustrated. And I think what I settled on is that I hate Ryan Poles. I just think that a lot of this is his fault because the expectations were the killer here. As I'm watching this, I mean, in my first little monologue I did, I was talking about how I thought the Vikings hype was warranted, right? That's a good football team. I thought this loss was totally reasonable. I thought the Vikings looked like the better roster with better coaches, and I don't think either of those things should be hot takes. I thought that Caleb played a better game than JJ overall, that sometimes he had mistakes, that sometimes he had some really nice flashes. But the problem was that when Caleb was in the draft, it was this whole thing. I don't know if you guys saw this story this week, actually, but apparently, like, Ryan Poles laughed Drake May tape out of the room. He wasn't entertaining anybody other than Caleb. He didn't really care about Jaden Daniels, all that. He turned to the city of Chicago and said, we can't miss on this guy. He's not going to have any flaws, and he's going to elevate our roster no matter what. That's kind of the vibe we were getting. And then Ryan Poles said, oh, by the way, I might have built the best rookie roster supporting cast ever. And when you say all those things, suddenly everyone's expectations, especially poor old Chicago fan expectations, they become misaligned with reality to a point where a game like this, where again I said it's a very reasonable outcome, you got a lot of people losing their minds and they feel justified in doing so. But if you just watched that game in a vacuum, if you plugged your ears, you said la la la, just watched all the film, you would have said, yeah, Caleb looked promising. By season's end, I'm excited to see what the Bears are. But for now, we have a week of misery, at least among their fans, because Ryan Poles, that's who I blame.
Very interesting. Logan, I'm a little bit surprised by just how enthusiastic and optimistic you were after this performance, because I think you make a good point, Anthony, that like expectations for Caleb were through the moon as a prospect. And by the way, I was all aboard the train. I was confident this guy was going to down the line be a top 5 quarterback in the league because clearly he has the upside for superstardom. And we see flashes of that often. We saw that absolutely in week 1. Right now, though, I'm just not sure that he has the foundation for good. And you have to be good. You have to consistently execute to be able to take advantage of what he can do out of structure, right? Because, I mean, some of these plays are just ridiculous. The sack evasion stuff from him, it is Josh Allen-esque. It is Mahomes-esque. The scrambling ability was so impressive. He can do stuff that only a couple guys can do. And even though taking sacks was such a big problem for him last year, that's just because he held on to the ball so ridiculously long. That offensive line also was definitely a lot weaker on paper than this year's offensive line. But in this game, with the Vikings heating him up like they were, like most dudes probably take a couple more sacks in this situation. He was able to escape a lot, make some plays with his legs, and the arm talent is nuts. Like, you can't deny it. The throw that he makes rolling out to his right up against the sideline to Rome Odunze on the first drive, that was ridiculous. The one throw that he makes on the deep outbreaking route to DJ Moore where he can't even step up because the pressure's coming in and he still puts it right on the money, like, I don't know, 30-something yards downfield. It's so impressive. But then you also have this extended stretch of the game where like the Bears aren't really moving the ball between the 7-minute mark in the first quarter, which is after they had that nice initial touchdown drive, up until a drive that started with under 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter. This team put up 3 points and they had one more chance to make a 50-yard field goal. But like, erratic is just still the word that I feel kind of defines Caleb Williams right now. And I want to lay out the context that this Vikings defense is awesome. And specifically for a young quarterback, where with Caleb, decision-making is probably the biggest concern. And last year, just him being able to be decisive, read a defense, those were his biggest limitations. Like, this is a tough draw there because they're hyper-aggressive. They keep you off balance. Now they've got even more talent up front. Javon Hargrave has 2 sacks in this game. You've got a Jonathan Allen. Like, it's a tough matchup. And I thought Caleb looked pretty comfortable on that first drive when they were mostly just rushing 4. But then, as they started dialing up more blitzes, I thought he was very up and down. He faced 16 blitzes in this game. Under those circumstances, went 6 of 13 with 36 passing yards. And the thing that stands out to me is, like, he just feels sped up in those spots, right? We talk about composure. We talk about poise. You said it, Anthony. It feels like his instinct is, okay, I've got to escape, or I've got to quickly move off of this, maybe even more quickly than is necessary. And things kind of just descend into chaos more quickly than I would like. And then you have the inaccuracy, which was the other big issue last year. And there are some costly misses in this one. Like, he doesn't have to throw every ball 100 miles an hour just because he can. And that's where some of these misses, like the one that he just sails high and too hot to Cole Kmet over the middle, that hurts. 3rd and 2, he throws a simple screen way behind Rome Odunze. He misses DJ Moore open over the middle on another 3rd down when they were in field goal range. So, like, there's still some bad misses in terms of timing, synergy with receivers, just accuracy, the ability to vary velocity at times. 3rd down was a big issue last year. It was a huge issue in this game where they were 3 of 12 on 3rd down. So I'm not going to say anything definitive about Caleb because I think there's a lot to learn here. And I think we're going to learn a lot throughout this season. Like, how much can Ben Johnson get him to maybe run play action more effectively? That's something that we haven't seen a lot of from Caleb, but we know that that's a staple of Ben Johnson offenses, at least with Jared Goff, that under center play action, parlaying the run game into some easy passing opportunities there. Is that a way to just make life easier on him? Can he just get on the page some more with his receivers, both in structure, again, where there were some timing mistakes, but also like in the scramble drill, there weren't a lot of successful passes downfield. There were a couple, but it was mostly him full-on scrambling, using his legs to gain the yardage. And I thought there were a couple times where it's like his receivers just have to do a better job of moving with him, finding open space, coming back to the ball. There's a lot that's still coming together here. So I don't know if I could say this was an encouraging debut. I don't know if we learned anything new about Caleb. We already knew that he has some of these special traits, and we also knew that he has these inconsistencies. I think overall, though, year 2 is going to tell us a lot, because even though last year, sure, I think Ryan Poles set expectations too high for this team. And we talk about the Bears now as back-to-back offseason champs, and people want to see results, and maybe there's too much pressure. But I do think the infrastructure is also there now. Like, I think that the offensive line is good enough. I think the weapons are very good. I do view Ben Johnson as one of the best offensive minds in football. And so I want to see Caleb put it together more consistently. And he's ultimately going to determine what this team is capable of doing, in my eyes.
I just think it's going to look better as this season goes along. This is game 1 with a lot of roster turnover. Like you mentioned, new offensive linemen. I'm glad you brought up the run game, because that's the component with Caleb that I do expect Chicago to get better in. One, the running game was ineffective for a lot of this game. They finally got it going a little bit in the second half, where I thought DeAndre Swift had a really good run on a cutback that was like the only one to write home about all game long. You know, they were the 29th rushing attack by yards per attempt last season. Like, Caleb really had no help in that regard, and that's where I do expect the Bears should be able to move the ball a little bit better on the ground and not put all of this on Caleb's shoulders. And I don't want to act like it was a perfect game, because it wasn't, but I thought there was a lot to be encouraged by, especially the legs. Like, that was something that I wish Caleb had tapped more into last season, where, I mean, he had 6 carries for 58 yards and a TD. Like, I think, you know, Caleb's going to be one of those guys where you've seen this with Jaden Daniels sometimes, and it's a real weapon. Like, when teams go into man coverage against Jaden, you can't do that. You have to have a spy when you go in man coverage, and I think Caleb is going to be one of those guys where if you're going, you know, you're not going to be able to run 2-man under with 2 high safeties and no spy anymore against this guy, because he's going to kill you if they're running a deep route concept and there's space under the middle. So it wasn't all perfect for Chicago, but I really do like a lot of what they got going. New offensive line. I believe in Ben Johnson. I think this offense is going to figure it out as the season goes along. And the Vikings are just great. Like, this is a really tough matchup for week 1, so it's a soul-crushing loss. Like, if I'm a Bears fan, I would feel empty inside today. I completely understand it. It's an embarrassing loss when you dominate 3 quarters of football like that, but it's a lot of moving parts. It's week 1 against a really tough football team. I buy into this offensive coordinator. I buy into this quarterback. And I still think the Bears are closer to the Lions than I think that they are to like a bottom feeder of a team, I guess I would say. I think the Packers and Vikings are atop this division, but I don't think the gap between them is that far. I think the Bears are going to be vying for a wild card spot at the end of this season.
I don't think that's unreasonable.
Yeah, to put a bow on your point, Logan, I mean, if I had to just break this one down real simple, if discourse was not a thing, if people weren't arguing back and forth about Caleb Williams, because you could really do that till the cows come home. The Vikings looked good in a game against a team that won 14 games last year with this roster, pretty much, right? The quarterback, different thing, but the roster. The reason to me that the Bears lost this game, if I just had to point to one thing, is the Vikings had double the rushing success rate of the Bears. It was 38 to 19%, I think is what it was. And 19%, that's not good. And I mean, especially with the Vikings, we saw it late when they were getting in their groove and all that. It was a lot of like these chunk runs from Jordan Mason. They started looking good. I think the reason the Bears lost was mainly the run game. And one thing we know for sure is that Ben Johnson can design a run game, and that this was Ben Johnson's first game with this team. So we know that the run game is going to get better, and we know that in the meantime, these guys played a close game against a pretty good roster, and Caleb overall showed flashes. So yeah, I'm not too concerned, but I get why everyone's concerned, because this is the team from Chicago that has a rough history.
Yeah, and there's always going to be some hyperbole, right? Like, people are now going to give JJ all the credit because he was clutch when ultimately he was horrible for 3 quarters. And I thought a lot of the guys, I mean, even on those last couple scoring drives, right? They have three touchdown drives of 50-plus yards, but you mentioned it, Anthony. The run game really gets going. Dudes are getting drawn open. Dudes are getting open because the skill position town is really good. Like, it's not like he went out there and carried them to a win. And meanwhile, I agree, the run game was not effective for Chicago. That put more pressure on Caleb. He did deal with a fair bit of pressure today. What I would say is ultimately both guys were up and down. I thought both guys were erratic, and that's probably going to be the reality for both these teams. I think that Caleb is a significantly more talented football player than J.J. McCarthy. There's no question that he's the guy who I would want if we're comparing these two long-term. Like, not a second of hesitation for me. But there is, at this point, so much icing with Caleb, and I would just like there to be a little bit more cake. I would just like there to be a little bit more consistency, a little bit more of that foundation, a little bit more of the fundamentals, a little bit more of the easy stuff, some of the automatic stuff, some of the layups, some of these money gotta have it downs. You just can't be missing these throws, and I understand he is still very young. He is ultimately an upside prospect, but he also is a guy who we did expect to be more impactful as a rookie than he was, and the accuracy has just been surprising to me because this was an issue throughout all of last year. And when people criticized Caleb as a prospect, and honestly, I didn't even agree with these criticisms because I thought, his ability to create out of structure, it's so valuable. It's a massive positive. People who did the whole he's playing backyard football stuff, that's not going to work in the NFL. That was what people talked about. I feel like his accuracy as a prospect was quite good, and that has not been the case in the NFL so far. So we'll see with both these teams. Ultimately, it's a close game between two teams that I think are going to be relatively close in the standings at the end of the year. I do think that the Vikings have the better roster, and they were able to pull it through at the end of this one. Let's talk about some of the other big stories of this week. We'll move on from Monday Night Football, and we'll put all these in the context again of real or fake. So, Anthony, I'm going to throw this one over to you first. We saw a couple of interesting results in the AFC West. Both these teams came up with wins, but I would say they looked a bit different in how they got it done. Real or fake? The Raiders are a bigger playoff threat than the Broncos.
Yeah, so I had a really hard time with this one. I feel like these two teams are on a pretty similar tier. They're kind of the same caliber, but for entirely different reasons. They really couldn't be more different. And so I kind of cheated. I said that to make the playoffs, I think the Broncos are the bigger threat. And to advance in the playoffs, I think it's the Raiders. And that's double cheating because if we're talking about advancing in the playoffs, well, then that would imply the Raiders got to the playoffs. And I think if we're implying that, that would imply that their defense is pretty good because that's one of the big questions. If their defense is Pete Carroll as Patrick Graham does, if they do their thing, that would be a good sign for me. But the reason I say all this, first and foremost, make the playoffs. It's pretty easy to make the playoffs if you have a defense that is the caliber of the Broncos defense. I think it was John Ledyard of Audibles and Analytics, that Substack and podcast. He went back and he did this deep dive of sorts into a EPA per play, expected points added per play, that efficiency metric, and top 10 defenses. And he found that teams with top 10 defenses, they make the playoffs at a pretty high rate, like a disproportionately almost high rate compared to other things. But that these teams, they don't actually advance in the playoffs at the rate that you would then relatively
I can tell you
expect.
all about that, actually.
Logan, did you write your thesis on this? I believe you have a doctorate in this.
Yeah, Pittsburgh Steelers are a great example of that. But that's exactly why I'm thinking what I'm thinking with the Broncos. This is a team that we know is going to be stable because Sean Payton and a great defense and a good offensive line. These are all things that, even if Bo Nix looks like a disaster against, say, the Titans in week 1, you might still get a win anyways. And that stuff might just happen all season. So I think the Broncos are a big threat in that way. But to advance in the playoffs, you guys saw Monday Night Football. This is the AFC we're talking about. You can take that defense wins championship stuff over to the National Football Conference. In the AFC, you need a good offense if you want to advance. And Geno Smith, he is a good quarterback. He's a very good quarterback, and he's the type of quarterback that, especially when paired with Pete Carroll, Patrick Graham, guys who I think can scheme out, relative victories on the defensive side, he can give you a game that gets you to advance in a conference filled with some titan quarterbacks, some of the best quarterbacks there are that we've literally ever seen. And I mean, furthering this point, just one more thing, we saw the Broncos last year play the Ravens, the Chiefs, the Chargers. What were the other teams? The Bengals too. They didn't beat any of these. Yeah, the Bills.
31-7 in the playoffs.
They got whooped by the teams with good quarterbacks for the most part, and even when they didn't get whooped, they still lost. They struggled even with that defense against the best of the best in the AFC. But Geno Smith, Brock Bowers, Chip Kelly, I really like what he seemed to be doing in this week 1. I think that's a team to me that if they make the playoffs, again, doing the cheating that I was doing, they might advance further. So that was a way of dodging the real or fake of it all. I find these teams really hard to parse out because they're so similar but so different. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking about this AFC West, which is a fascinating division.
Nail, meat, hammer. Anthony, I thought you said that perfect. I completely agree. Geno Smith is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. He is not just very good. I'd say he's great. I know some people can kind of get lost in some of the interception numbers and stuff like that. I've come to a point where if you're that good of a playmaker, I honestly don't care about some of the aggressiveness and some of the turnovers. The pick he threw against New England, admittedly, it's triple coverage. Literally, the guy he's throwing the ball to, it's a triangle of Patriots around him. So I can't excuse the interception, but he can spin it. And the Raiders' offense looked really, really crisp in week 1. The timing of routes, I think Chip Kelly and Geno Smith are going to have a really well-oiled machine year 1 on that offense. And there's a ton of talent. It's not just Brock Bowers. They've got Michael Mayer who stepped in and I thought played really well in spot for him in the second half. Jacoby Myers is a really good receiver. And then I like what you saw from Thornton and Tucker a little bit too. So I think you said it exactly right. If the Raiders get in, I don't want to see him because I don't want to see Geno Smith in a high-stakes situation because he can put belt to ass. Geno is a playmaker, and I don't want to play playmakers in the playoffs. There's a reason the Steelers get their ass whipped every time they get to the dance because we got Kenny Pickett or Russell Wilson or Mason Rudolph lining up under center. Bo Nix doesn't scare me, and that's why every time the Denver Broncos are going to get there, people were really mad at us, Carson, last year when our take about the Broncos after the playoffs were Bo Nix is going to handcuff you to mediocrity. And nobody could believe it because he was so good as a rookie and he won so many games. I don't think Bo Nix is good. I think Geno Smith is great. That's really the difference maker. And for that reason, yeah, I do think the Raiders are a bigger threat. And I don't know. Me personally, I'm worried that Bo Nix is going to lose the Broncos games this season and potentially miss the playoffs. I'm scared, man. Peyton seemed to unleash Bo a little bit more with this playbook in week 1. He seemed to give him a longer leash. I thought year 1 Bo Nix was very conservative. I'm going to hold your hand. We're going to get really simple decisions. Sean Payton let Bo Nix spin it in week 1, and he coughed up some bad picks. So I wonder if Payton's going to open up that playbook more, if it opens up more opportunities for Bo to give the other team the ball. I do like the Raiders more. It has nothing to do with the defense. It's all about Geno, but I'll ride with the Raiders, man. I'm all in on them.
Very interesting. This is a lot of anti-Broncos sentiment, it feels, for a team that was a lot of people's offseason darling. And to be fair, I think they did a lot right in the offseason. They took what was arguably the best defense in football and they added defensive talent. They added some skill position talent offensively and already had a great offensive line, and they already were in the playoffs. But also, I was never the highest on the Broncos because of basically exactly what you guys both laid out. I mean, I think that there's such a floor to ceiling dynamic here, where like the regular season floor for the Broncos is so high because I think they have the best defense in football, and you're just going to win a number of games based off that. But to me, the ultimate example of like the reverse archetype of the Steelers, right, which I think we've already established, they are the standard for. The Broncos last year were one of those teams where, yes, they can beat up on bad teams, but I think they were 1-8 if you exclude the Chiefs game against teams with winning records, and they got absolutely demolished in the Bills. And as a Bills fan, like I knew I predicted a 24-point win, and it was a 24-point win. Like they were not the team in terms of being a playoff threat some people tried to make them out to be. The flip side of that to me is like the idea of the Rams of the last couple years, where they have some low points in the regular season. They only win 10 games, and they get to the playoffs, and it's holy shit, we have to go up against Matt Stafford. And there's also Sean McVay, and there's the receivers of it all, and that defense was peaking late last year. But like that to me feels like the path that the Raiders could take with Geno. I think Geno is a top 10 quarterback. I think he does so many things at a high level. His pocket presence, his aggression, his arm talent, his accuracy, it's all so damn good. Nobody made more big-time throws in week one. They had 9 completions of 20-plus yards. He had 360-plus passing yards, and I think the run game has more potential to get going here. So ultimately, I feel like this is going to come down to 2 units. It's going to come down to the Raiders' defense and the Broncos' offense, because I feel very confident the Broncos defense is going to be elite and the Raiders offense is going to be quite good. It's not like going to be the equivalent of the Broncos defense. It's not going to be the best offense in football. I just think the line still is pretty mediocre. I have some concerns about it. They were still able to get some pressure on Geno in that week 1 game for sure. But I think it's going to be a very balanced offense with a very good quarterback. And ultimately, like, I think the value of a very good offense can be similar to that of an elite defense once you get into the playoffs, just because you have to be able to put up points. You have to be able to like duel with the best of the best, who ultimately, no matter how good your defense is, you're not holding Josh Allen and the Bills to 13 points. You're not doing that to the Ravens. You're not doing that to the Chiefs. So that's sort of the philosophy that you laid out, Anthony. So that's why I look at the other side of the ball for both teams. And ultimately, I think like with the Broncos defense being as great as they are, and with the offensive infrastructure being what it is, I will say this is fake, even though I really like the Raiders. I do think the Broncos have the better chance of getting to the playoffs. So I guess that's basically how I'll answer this question, just to pick a side. Shout out, pick a side. But like the offensive line is so good. I think what we saw from the running back talent, just in terms of Harvey and Dobbins making some plays, like that was a dimension that didn't exist in that same way in the Broncos offense last year. You do have Evan Engram in there now, but I was really concerned by what we saw from Bo, man. I mean, he was only pressured 8 times in week 1. Under pressure, though, he went 2 for 7 with 8 yards and 2 interceptions. And like 2 bad picks where he is staring down receivers. He's totally forecasting throws. Dude, easy undercuts by the DBs.
It looked like the first 4 weeks of last year, man.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that like the thing with Bo is he's consistently been bad under pressure. And he does have an ability to make plays with his legs at times, but in terms of like EPA per dropback, he was one of the worst in football under pressure last year. I do think that he can panic there and struggle. He's not accurate. He's 32nd in completion percentage over expected last year, one of the worst in football there. So I do think ultimately he puts a hard ceiling on what this team can do. It's very hard for me to see them winning a playoff game in the AFC, but I think the roster is just probably too good for me to take the Raiders at this point after 1 week. And also, Bo can't play worse than he did this week. Now, to be fair, he played so badly that they literally should have lost to the Tennessee Titans. Like, that's how ugly it was, but I don't know. I still do see a high floor here, and if the Raiders defense overachieves, then I would flip. If the Raiders defense looks pretty good, then I would ride with them. I just don't know how much confidence I have in that unit. But the AFC West, man, hell of a division. Speaking of which, we had another AFC West duel. This was, of course, Friday Night Football in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and we saw a win for the Chargers over the Chiefs. So, Logan, I'll ask you first. Real or fake? The Chargers, after that win, are the best team in the AFC West.
I think I'm going to take the Chargers to win the AFC West. I mean, after that.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Logan Camden, Chiefs truther over the years.
I mean, the Chiefs are still going to
the flip. Maybe this is Overreaction Tuesday.
Hey, man, I'm ready to do some 180s right now. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, look, I wouldn't bet against Mahomes in like a single game playoff format. Still, like, he scares me, and still it felt like if there was a fifth quarter in this football game, like Patrick Mahomes is going to take it. But the Chiefs sucked ass around Mahomes. Like, I don't really like. This was Mahomes telling everybody to get on his back. It was a lot of the same I thought we saw in the bad way of last year. I thought the running game lacked dynamism whatsoever, and it's like. The Chiefs are doing this weird thing where they're like, oh, yeah, we have the greatest quarterback to ever walk the planet, but we're going to hand the ball off 40 times a game and try to play ball control football. I think they need to let Mahomes spin it some more. But the running game, bad again. The offensive line, atrocious. Jawan Taylor sucks, man. Like the penalties, just getting beat off the line of scrimmage, bad. So it was bad from the offensive line. The defense was getting carved up like a turkey by Justin Herbert. No pressure, zero. Like it was Chris Jones versus the world up front. And so it's like, don't get me wrong, the Chiefs still have building blocks that I really like. Andy Reid, Spags, Patrick Mahomes, Chris Jones. I just don't know if it's enough to make up for really the lack of talent that is down the rest of this roster. And then I look out at the receiving weapons. They're going to be without Xavier Worthy for a little bit. They're going to be without Rashee Rice. I think Hollywood Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster and Travis Kelce can do enough to keep this offense up. But I just think the Chiefs are going to be thoroughly, like, just above average this season. And when I look at the Chargers, I think the Chargers are a really good football team. So, like, I'm not doing the Chiefs are going to miss the playoffs. They're cooked. This is the end of the dynasty. No, I think the Chiefs win 11 games. I think they make the playoffs as a wild card. I just think the Chargers are going to win like 13 and run away with this division. Wow. Like, Justin Herbert is my dark horse MVP candidate. I think his obviously the line is not as good with Slater, but they look good in week 1. I think this defense is going to be top 10 again. So I look at their recipe. They got a coach and a quarterback that I love. They've got a more dynamic rushing game, I think, than they had last year. The receiving core is better. I just like a lot of what the Chargers have got going on. So, yeah, I'm going to do a 180 on this one. I think the Chargers win more games. I think they win this division. And I think both of these teams are really big playoff threats. But I do prefer the Chargers.
Wow. Anthony, what's your take here?
Yeah, so I'm a Patriots fan. I know what it's like to be in the midst of a dynasty. Anthony, high school Anthony, me knows this. To be in the middle of that and to be able to do the nobody believes in us gimmick because your team is just kind of boring and people are tired of you. I'm sure that's how Chiefs fans are kind of feeling right now because this is the Chiefs after all and people are betting against them, but I'm going to do it. And it's kind of like what you said, Logan. I'm not saying this team's going to miss the playoffs. If anything, I think Chiefs fans should be happy that we're giving them some hashtag not his fault for Patrick Mahomes. That roster just doesn't look like the best roster in the AFC West. I think that's the simplest way for me to put it. If this was a one-off playoff game, I'd probably still pick the Chiefs over anyone else in this division. But if we're talking about the best team, T-E-A-M team, in the AFC West right now, roster and all, if Greg Roman keeps letting Justin Herbert cook and pass over expected, which he did last year in the back half of the year, I feel like people don't talk about that enough. Yeah, I think the Chargers are looking like the best option. And I think a big part of that to me is one thing that made this Chargers offense so unappetizing last year, even though they were really efficient, Justin Herbert barely threw any interceptions, all of that. The one thing that kind of gave everybody bad vibes, and it was kind of their downfall in the playoffs, the receiving core was just not interesting, and It just wasn't that explosive either. I thought this was pretty neat. So wide receiver, pass rate to wide receivers, the amount of times that Justin Herbert gave the ball to his wide receivers relative to everybody else, 82% in this game. That was the highest mark of his career, which I think is wild because that spans back to when he had Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. Still has Keenan Allen. It's a very different Keenan Allen now. But the fact that between Keenan, Unk still got it, Ladd McConkey, and then Quentin Johnston, who apparently Freaky Friday'd with CeeDee Lamb or whatever, I mean, it's pretty exciting. That's not even talking about the rookie. I forget his name. And then, the Will Dissly, tight ends, all that. I think that looks like an offense that can get the job done, especially with Omarion Hampton in the backfield. And especially if Greg Roman keeps embracing this weapon that he has at quarterback, this freak. Mm-hmm. And then on defense, T.R. Tart, Khalil Mack. I mean, we know he can always decline in the back half of years. That's kind of his thing. But he looked good in the game. Deion Henley looks like maybe the best linebacker in the AFC West.
He looks like
it's
a superstar,
lot to get
man.
excited about, and and it's a lot to get excited about. And the one thing you could have said in years past, the one thing, is that, well, they're the Chargers and they're going to charger because that's what they do. They charger. What better way could you have started the season than beating the Chiefs, who had a 17-game win streak in one-score games, in a one-score game? Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, in their matchups against each other, I believe Herbert was 1-7, maybe 1-8, I don't remember. To win a game against Patrick Mahomes and break that, that's the perfect start to a season where maybe for once we can kind of flip the script, stop having the Chiefs be the, automatic favorite of sorts in the division, and maybe we start getting hyped about the Chargers for once. That's how I'm feeling after 1 week. Can always change, but yeah, it just feels like a reasonable take to me to say that this looks like the best team.
This is very interesting, gentlemen. This is very interesting to me. Look, I didn't have a big gap between these teams in the preseason. I mean, I had the Chiefs winning 12 games. I had the Chargers winning 11 games. I actually had them both winning 1 playoff game. So I think the Chargers are very good. I really like the Chargers. I think Justin Herbert is something to behold, man. I mean, just what a specimen, what a spectacle. And he was going to work in week 1. I agree. I think that there's more upside to this Chargers offense. That was sort of what was lacking last year, that lack of just explosive playmakers around him. Now, they were letting it rip in week 1. Quentin Johnson looks improved. Keenan Allen, even though obviously he is not what he was at his peak, I do think some people underrate. Last time he was with the Chargers, he had 1,200 yards. So there's just a level of familiarity, connection, and playing with an elite quarterback that elevates him where it's like, Keenan Allen is going to look better automatically as a Charger in 2025 than he did as a Bear in 2024. So maybe that addition or him coming back was a little bit underrated. And I do think that Ladd is a stud. I've said this before. If they had Slater, I would be all in on the Chargers as a Super Bowl contender kind of team. That sort of elite tackle tandem with Becton now, better offensive line, better weapons, better running back play, Justin Herbert, really good defense. I'd be all in. I just don't think the offensive line is that good. We'll see what level the playmakers are really at. Week 1 was extremely encouraging, but I don't know. Did Quentin Johnson actually get that much better? Did he have a really good game? We'll see going forward. And for the Chiefs, I guess, I just don't see the same need to panic as some other people are seeing. Offensively, the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be totally fine, in my opinion. I think they're going to have a better offense than last year when, no, they weren't explosive, but they still were able to control ball games. They had the most plays per drive. They were 10th in points per drive. And now I think there's more talent in that offense. Rashee Rice not being there really matters, okay? I think that he immediately is the most dynamic playmaker on this field other than Patrick Mahomes when he plays for this team. I think that'll make a difference in how this receiving core is viewed because I'm seeing a lot of panic there, and I just don't feel bad about the totality of a group with Rashee and Worthy and Kelsey and Hollywood Brown. Hasn't looked good for them, but if he's your 4th target, I don't necessarily feel bad about that. The offensive line, I've had concerns about just because it was such an issue last year, and then obviously they lose Tooney. I thought they protected decently in that game. The penalties on Jawan Taylor have to be cut down upon because it's just so ridiculously beyond anybody else in football. But in terms of pressure rate, I think Pat was pressured 25% of the time in that game, which is a very good rate. So yes, there was a lot of pressure on him. I mean, he had to create a lot out of structure. They didn't really get the run game going. Yes, they love the run game, even though they don't run it efficiently and they don't have dynamic running back talent. But it is part of sort of their philosophy of, okay, let's just control the football games. And they have Patrick Mahomes, man. It's just interesting to me that although the Chargers looked very impressive, so many people are so quickly moving towards them and off of the Chiefs. And I know neither of you guys are saying that you're expecting a Chiefs meltdown, but this team has averaged 13 wins a season since 2018. They've been in the AFC title game every single one of those years. And there have been questions about this roster for each of the last 3 years. And there they have still been at the end in the Super Bowl, winning the division, which they've done, by the way, even predating Patrick Mahomes. This would be their 10th straight division title. I understand that the defense has regressed. That's, to me, where I would be concerned about this Chiefs roster. I think even I overrated the Chiefs defense last year. and just kind of assumed, oh, they can be close to what they were in 2023 when they were arguably the best defense in football. And they weren't that last year. And they're not going to be that this year. I think they could be an average defense, a very average defense. But with the clutch execution, with the superstar player factor, Chris Jones didn't have his best week 1 performance, but I still think he's so impactful. Having the Mahomes on the field, having Andy Reid, having Spags, there is a lot of reasons that I think the Chiefs' floor as a team is still so ridiculously high. And I feel like they're a very good bet to win 11 or 12 games. And I think the Chargers will win like 11 games too. But I'm not going to move off my preseason prediction here. So I will say this is fake. I think the Chargers look very good, but I'm also really not any more concerned about the Chiefs than I was coming into the year. Like, I had them 3rd in the AFC. I didn't expect them to be as great as the Ravens or the Bills. Their offense isn't as dynamic as the Bills. They don't have the overall talent on both sides of the ball of the Ravens, but other than that, I'll take them over anybody else. Still, I have that level of confidence in them. Any more pushback from you guys over on the Chargers train here?
Not too much. The only thing that I would say, and this is kind of to the point you were making, is with the Chiefs, I can totally respect the take that they're still the best team in the AFC West. But we talk a lot about how stable they are in some ways. They just win, right? They're just clutch, right? Those are points that you really can't debate no matter what. The one thing that actually is trending in a direction, it's not been stable, is that Chiefs defense. And what's funny is, I mean, super broad, if you zoom out, I think the Chiefs are the only team who have been a top 10 defense by EPA per play over the last 4 seasons. I think that's what it was. No other team has done that, just at Steve Spagnuolo and company. So you would think that that's going to be steady, right? But the thing is, if you look year by year, they have gotten slightly worse and slightly worse, losing Snead, all of that. It's been hard. Last year, they were trying to figure out where to put McDuffie. A lot of what they were doing, it was deceiving on that defensive end because Patrick Mahomes was holding the ball for so long on offense that those scores were low. The thing that I'm really worried about that defense, and this is not related to numbers or gut feel or anything, Benjamin Solak of ESPN, he's great. A lot of times I feel bad plugging TikTok videos on a podcast, but I'm in good company for once. On TikTok, I highly recommend checking out his account. He had like a 5-6 minute breakdown compilation of all the times against the Chargers where the Chiefs their defenders just miscommunicated or ran into each other. It was a weirdly prominent issue. I know it looked like Justin Herbert was dealing all day. He was. But guys were suspiciously open, right? We kind of have to admit that's not a mind-blowing receiving core over there, even if it is sound, good, solid, all those things. The Chiefs were to blame a lot more than I think I have fully appreciated, than I think a lot of people have fully appreciated. And if they have miscommunication issues as the season goes on, which, I mean, that's one thing where as the season goes on, it shouldn't happen that much. But if they continue to regress in that way, last year they kind of lost the actual elite play. And this year, if they can't keep it together on that communication mentality, mental side, that's something I really would be worried about because we know Patrick Mahomes and co, they're going to do all they can on that offensive end to keep games close and not make backbreaking mistakes. The defense has been a backbone of sorts, though, and it might not be. That's one thing I'm worried about.
It's totally fair to point out, and like the defensive talent has regressed, and they lose Justin Reid this offseason, who's been a stable presence for them. What I will say is they are definitely coaching merchants. They are definitely Chris Jones merchants. And they are definitely Trent McDuffie merchants. But this is where I lay out like that formula in big games against really good teams. It's been pretty undeniable. Their best players making plays and their coaches just outthinking the opposing coaches. Like, that's been the difference maker. That's the reason, obviously, along with having Patrick Mahomes. But I don't think you looked at this defense last year and thought, oh, it's super talented across the board. And they did take a step back, but nevertheless, I mean, outside of the Eagles game, which was just an all-around disaster, like in big games, they tend to step up and play pretty well. So I see where you're coming from. I am just going to give the Chiefs sort of the ultimate credit here and hang on with them as the best team in the AFC West until they are probably convincingly dethroned. We'll see. I'm going to hold out. On the flip side of this, we're talking about some of the best in the AFC. Real or fake, Anthony, that the Miami Dolphins, after losing 33-8 to Indiana Jones and the Colts, are they the worst team in the AFC?
I'm surprised to say this. You know, before this pod, when I was prepping my notes, I was like, can that really be? But I think it's real. I think it's pretty real. And the definitive reason that I have for this is because you hear this saying a lot, but culture in the NFL, all of that, it's about what you look like at your lowest, not what you look like at your best. And if we're comparing worst teams in the AFC, there's another big team that's going to pop right to mind, right? It's the Cleveland Browns. We know what the Browns' culture is at their lowest. They've been there for a while. They live in the gutter. They know what that's all about. The Dolphins, though, they're not accustomed to this. The vibes are rancid right now, and they don't know how to feel about that. Victoria Zeller, great tweeter, she has this one tweet that's just been, people bring it up every couple months, and it's the Mike McDaniel nerdy Rick and Morty shtick, whatever you want to call it, Pickle Rick, all that. It probably goes over well, the quips and all that stuff when you're front running and when you're doing well. The second you have a bad game and you got to go in the locker room and he's kind of doing that, it might not work the same. And it's kind of feeling like it's not working the same. Tua in Miami, they turned the ball over on 43% of their possessions in their game against the Colts. That's the most a Dolphins team has done that in a game since 2002. This team really has no strength in their secondary. They're not too great on offense, at least not when Tua is commanding all of it. And the definitive deciding thing of all of this is that this team doesn't have a Myles Garrett. That's if we're talking about the worst possible team in football, and one team has Myles Garrett and is accustomed to playing these types of dogfight games, and the other is looking around going, what's happening to us? We're not used to this. I think I know which one I'm picking with if we're selling stock. It's the Dolphins for me.
I completely agree with you, and it's not just the Myles Garrett component. It's really what you're talking about with the culture, man. The Browns, even when they get their ass beat, are buttoned up. Kevin Stefanski, I believe he's a 2-time Coach of the Year now, right? Like, yes. Stefanski has these guys ready to go. I mean, damn, dude, they're rallying behind 80-year-old Joe Flacco right now, man. He's got to get his walker to come down out there, like Aaron Rodgers. Like, this team can buy in to Joe Flacco and play hard behind him. And if you didn't watch that game, had the Bengals reeling on the ropes. Like, this is a popular pick for some people to make the playoffs or to go do some damage this year. And if their rookie kicker Schmidt hadn't blown an extra point, they at least go to OT. If he doesn't blow the game-winning kick, they win in week 1. And to me, it's not just Garrett. It's the fact that they have Newsome and Delpit and Ward on the back end. They've got Mason Graham up front. And, this team has a defense that I can bank on and has a quarterback that I at least know can read a field and do his thing and that this team can buy into. I think the Dolphins are phony. And I know they've been – I feel bad for doing this because Miami has been the punching bag of the NFL week 1. I think rightfully so because you lost to Daniel Jones week 1. But – I don't like anything they got going for them. Like you said, Anthony, I think this is a team that is rapidly losing faith in their head coach, rapidly losing faith in their quarterback. Tyreek Hill is blowing up again on the sideline. The defense looks in disarray. I don't think there's anything encouraging about the Miami Dolphins. I said this after week 1 on our reaction show. I think McDaniel is probably going to get fired midseason. And Carson, you brought it up too. This is a byproduct of you paying a mediocre quarterback like a superstar, and now they've got to lay in their bed, man. They already made it, so I think this was kind of an inevitability, and yeah, I didn't expect to be saying this after 1 week, but I do think the Dolphins are the worst team in the AFC.
They definitely feel like a powder keg right now. Miami feels like the Balkans circa 1914. That's a World War I joke. Everybody loves those. I don't know, maybe it's underreaction Tuesday for me. I don't know if I can say that they're the worst team in the AFC. Now, their debut could not possibly have gone any worse. I think you guys make a lot of good points. I mean, first of all, I do believe that paying Tua the amount that they did was basically franchise suicide. I think that has laid such a hard ceiling on what they can be when he just has so many limitations as your quote-unquote franchise quarterback. And I also think that although Mike McDaniel is a brilliant schematic football coach, I do not think that he is a culture guy, and I think the culture for this team is rapidly crumbling. And there was already all the noise with Tyreek Hill wanting out last year. That's only going to pick up. Now Tyreek Hill has yet another domestic violence allegation, so just a terrible human being on top of all this. That's not going to help the shitstorm that is picking up in Miami right now. There is a lot to be very negative about with Miami and very freaked out about. And still, even though I felt like coming into this year, like this was going to come to a boiling point, and after this year it was going to be a hard reset, like The reason I can't say that they're going to be the worst team in the AFC, there's a couple. First of all, this offense has been pretty successful over the last couple years when Tua Tagovailoa is on the field. Even last year, right? I want to say they averaged like 26 points per game when Tua played. They really struggled because of their terrible backup situation when he was out, but they were still a very competitive football team because of that. The defense looked absolutely lifeless. I think some people overrated that defense. They were capable last year. So I don't know. I just wonder if there's still a little bit too much talent here, as ugly as everything feels, for them to be worse than, say, the Tennessee Titans. Like, that's who I'm looking at, and I just think that roster is still an abomination. Even though I was impressed by Cam Ward in week 1, I understand the numbers are not going to look good, but I thought that he was asked to do so much, and he made some impressive throws, and you saw the quick release, and you saw the velocity, you saw the ability to make plays out of structure, you saw his aggression testing tight windows, like just putting balls with zip on receivers' hands, and there were just a lot of near misses and some drops, but also, like, he took a couple bad sacks. There's a reason he took 6 sacks. The offensive line is terrible. The receiving core, there's a reason they dropped a lot of passes. A couple of them are Calvin Ridley, but, like, the offensive situation for him is just so bad. There's a play where they run a wide receiver screen. Nobody turns for the ball. Like, too much shit like that is happening in Tennessee. I don't like Brian Callahan. I think this defense is bad. And so even though I like Cam, it's like, as a rookie, is he going to be the dude who saves this team from winning 3 games when everything around him is kind of falling apart? I don't know if I can say that. Whereas I look at the Dolphins and I'm like, yes, I think they're going to be bad. And this is like a huge moment for them because they could fall apart right here and maybe they just can't get it back from that. But also, like, I just see a much clearer path to them still winning 7 games. I don't see how the Titans can win 7 games.
7?
Is that obscenely high?
I kind of think I think this team's going to max out at 5 maybe.
So what is it? Is it mostly the culture? Do you think they are mentally going to implode? Because I think the talent is limited. It's still clearly better than the Titans.
I mean, if you lose Reek, what is this team's superpower? What do they do at a high level?
You don't have to have a superpower to win 6 or 7 games.
I think the offensive line is among the worst in football. I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball the way they have the past 2 seasons. I think Tua has regressed to a point where if you're not doing simple dink and dunk, get the ball out of his hands, quick shit, he's going to crap his pants. I think the defense is horrible, and I think this is a team whose culture is deteriorating in front of our face. Like, I don't know, man. I think the red flags are all there, and I don't see the glue. I don't see what is holding this team together, man. Like,
so maybe it's just Tua then. Because, like, here's the thing. I've always been low on Tua. But also, like, he's always been capable of games like the one that he played on Sunday. The worst games from Tua have always been complete disasters where you're like, okay, this dude is very physically limited, right? He can't create out of structure. He can't make certain high leverage throws.
He's a bottom 10 quarterback.
And sometimes he's just really fucking stupid and he freaks out, and like those 3 turnovers were hideous. But the interesting thing with Tua is, like, his overall turnovers never look crazy. They all come at once, though. He'll have a 3 turnover game. He'll have a 4 turnover game. And they'll get beaten, like, destroyed by a good team. Often the Buffalo Bills, which I very much enjoy. But, like, that's when Tua gets exposed, right? It all happens at once. But the overall level is, like, if you look at his production from last year, he's still completing 73% of his passes, averaging over 7 yards per attempt, averaging 260 yards per game, 19 touchdowns, 7 picks, and the Dolphins are a pretty good offense. So, like, again, I'm saying I don't think Tua is as good as those numbers. But it's also hard for me to see Tua going from this guy who has been able to put together capable regular season production to suddenly being the worst quarterback in football. Because he looked like the worst quarterback in football week 1, and I think that's a big part of the reason the Dolphins looked like the worst team in football. The defense was a problem of its own. The protection, the run game, everything was bad. But if Tua doesn't play such an exceptionally horrible game, I don't know that we're having this conversation yet. And I don't think Tua's going to consistently be at that level. I think he'll be fine.
I think Tua's going to consistently be bad because he's a byproduct of his situation. The reason Tua's had all this success is because Mike McDaniel had this good scheme and they were able to run the ball and the offensive line was good and he had these elite weapons. I think the
I
fact
don't know
that
the offensive line has ever been good. And
I think
the run
the
game
fact
was
that
very good in 2023. It was explosive. The run game wasn't good last year, and they were still an okay offense.
I think the fact that the situation around him has deteriorated is going to lead to Tua. And I hate doing this. I seriously wonder if the concussions have hindered Tua long-term in terms of decision-making, and he's lost something. Like, I don't know. I've got all of my red flags for this team have gone up, and I am offloading all of my Dolphins stock. I don't think there's anything that you could say that could talk me back into Miami winning.
I'm not trying to talk
7
anybody
games,
into
man.
Miami. I'm trying to talk people into Miami as the 14th or 15th team in the AFC, not the 16th.
I'm out.
I'm just answering the question. What do you think, Anthony? Because you mentioned the Browns. I actually don't view the Browns, even though I picked them to be bottom 3 in the AFC. I still think that they're in that range. Like, just because of the defense, like there is a floor there. I think it's the Titans. I think that's the team that we look at. And even though Cam is impressive, again, can he stabilize an all-around disaster of a roster?
Yeah, no, you're right to bring up the Titans, and it was on me for nominating the Browns first. I'm actually with you. I would say that the Titans, I mean, they picked first in the draft for a reason. Their roster is less complete than that of Cleveland's. That being said, I think I am just too athlete-pilled when it comes to the quarterback position to keep defending Tua the way that, I mean, I've given him his flowers when they were due in the past. I just can't do it anymore because this guy has limitations, and those limitations are physical. I mean, I saw him fail to get the ball to a check down in the flat on Sunday. I saw him panic from these pockets where bigger, braver quarterbacks would have stood tall, strong, ripped it over the middle. And we're talking like 4th downs and stuff. He's trying to check it down. These are bad plays that I think are a byproduct of his build, just the type of quarterback he is. And when I compare that to someone like Cam Ward, who truthfully I was really impressed by the way Ward played on Sunday against, again, that's the Broncos defense. They're pretty good.
Yeah.
That Titans team kept it close against Denver. Tua got blown out by a team with Daniel Jones at quarterback. I mean, the Colts became the first team this century to score on every possession. I know Tua's not on defense, but I think that just goes to my point that they're probably the worst team in the AFC because when your defense, your starting quarterback is Storm Duck and he gets injured, I don't know who's up next after that. I really don't. And on offense, you've got former teammates of Tua. This was Xavier Howard. He said to Colts reporters after the game, and this quote probably won't surprise you guys because we've been hearing stuff like this for a couple years now. He said, "We knew Tua gets the ball out pretty quick once we take away his first read. I feel like it's panic mode after that." That's not a great thing to have your former teammates say about you. And it was a good insight. It was a correct observation. Mike McDaniel, he just got quoted as saying, on the bright side, things can't get worse than this. It's one of those Pickle Rick quotes, if you ask me. I'm just not in on this stuff. The vibes are bad, and I don't think the roster is good enough to make me feel good. And yes, I think it's very sound to look back at previous Dolphins teams and say, there's clearly a version of this that works. That is the rational and sound thing to do. But when there are this many moving parts in the game of football, this many teams, this many players on a team, this many games in a week, all that stuff, you have to be a bit irrational, when you're making your projections going forward. And I think the past is the past, and we do know there's a version of the Dolphins that works, but whether or not you think it's rational, I'm done with it. I don't want any more to do with that, and I'm just saying going forward, I think the vibes are going to stay bad and the team is going to be bad.
I think the vibes are going to stay bad. I think the team is going to be bad. I may be just not taking it quite as far as you guys. Like, I'll say it. I think Cam Ward right now is probably going to be a better quarterback for this season than Tua Tagovailoa. He has more traits that I value at the quarterback position. I was really impressed with how he held up in a really difficult situation in week 1. And I think that Tua tends to melt down in difficult situations and all his limitations are exposed. And still, I think Tua is in the better offensive situation, flawed as it may be, having playmakers like Waddle and Achane. And if Tyreek does stay with the team, which we'll see what happens there, like he has a play caller like Mike McDaniel. This Dolphins defense, I'm worried about it. They were 10th in points per drive allowed last year. Like, I'm out on the Dolphins, okay? I don't want to make it sound like there's anything that I like here. I am literally just holding them up to the worst roster in the AFC. Honestly, the worst roster in football. The reason I think the Saints, for example, are going to have a worse record than the Titans by like one game is because of the quarterback play. If you stack up position to position, there's not a worse team in football than the Tennessee Titans. So I'll still lean on them. This is truly the definition of a shit off. We have gone past a mid off, and we are now debating who is the absolute worst of the worst. But yeah, regardless, it's over for Miami. You know, everything is going up in flames after this, except they don't have an out with Tua's contract until after 2026. But McDaniel is going to be gone, I think, inevitably. Tyreek, it seems like, is going to be gone at some point or another, in one way or another. And it's very disappointing for the entire franchise. How about another team that had an alarming week one performance? Now, the standard for them is much higher, and the competition was much better than Danny Dimes and the boys. But there's a lot of concern going around about the Detroit Lions. After a 2-touchdown loss to the Packers, it was a 3-touchdown deficit until a garbage time touchdown. Logan, real or fake that we should be worried about the Lions?
I'm worried. I mean, I was the guy carrying the flag and the torch for the Lions in the offseason. Don't panic. They're going to be all right. They're too talented to fail. I think I've got a solution, man. Let's put John Morton, put him on a porch somewhere with a rocking chair and a glass of sweet tea and a cigar or something, and let's send Mike McDaniel to Detroit and have him call some plays.
Mid-season. I like it.
Right now, yeah. I don't know, dude. The Lions' offense looked like a stale piece of moldy bread that had been left out on the counter for a long time. They gave Jared Goff the Alex Smith treatment. It was check down central, very little vertical passing attack. The running game was mediocre. The offensive line looked like it had regressed. I think you said it really, really well in the preseason, Carson. You said there are a lot of moving parts. It's going to take take a lot of time for this team to gel and figure it out. And I'm kind of there. I've got a lot of red flags about Detroit after week one. One, Jared Goff looked really uncomfortable and immobile again with a new play caller. The offense lacked dynamism, even though they are very talented. And the pass rush was anemic against Green Bay. It's hard for me to make really critical judgments on Detroit right now because they played against a team that I hold in very high regard. I think the Packers are a Super Bowl contender. I thought Jordan Love looked awesome in week one. And so, I don't know. I'm stuck between two conclusions. My first conclusion with Detroit is they went up against a real deal contender and they got smacked in the face and they could still make the wild card. The other conclusion is they lost a lot in the offseason. They're probably barely going to miss out on the playoffs. I still think this roster is really talented. I got to see more from the offensive line. I got to see more from the offense in general, and I have to see some pressure from this defense for me to really have confidence about this team moving forward. So, simply put, I'm worried about the Lions. My alarm bells are ringing. I'm really nervous. I had this team winning double-digit games. They didn't look like that in week one, but they did play a team that I think is a bona fide Super Bowl contender. So I'm going to say wait and see, but I'm very worried, and they did not look like a Super Bowl contender in week one.
Anthony, what do you think?
Yeah, so if I needed plausible deniability in week 17, if the Lions end up being good and one of their fans tries to stick it to me, oh, you didn't believe in us, you thought we were going to suck, I would say that I still might have believed in you guys a little bit. I'm going to say real here, but that's because the question is, are we allowed to be concerned? Should we be concerned? Concern's an emotion, and I'm definitely feeling it, and I think it's very real for everybody to feel right now because regardless of how we think the Lions might do this year, maybe they still are a playoff team and all of that, this team believes that they are gunning for Super Bowls right now, that this is their window, and they just lost by multiple scores to a team in not only their own conference, their own division, who believes they're capable of the exact same thing. Oh, and it's already probably the best division in football when you include the other two teams. I'm very concerned about the Lions, and I think that's the easiest answer ever. Yes, this concern is very real. I mean, you take some of the stats from Detroit on Sunday against this Packers defense that now has Micah Parsons. They averaged 3.8 yards per play in week one. That's the fewest in a game for them since 2020, week 16, I think it was. Jared Goff averaged 3.3 air yards per attempt. That's his sixth worst mark since 2021. What was it? They had 16 of their 22 carries on the day. The Lions ball carriers were hit behind the line of scrimmage. Let that sink in. That is nuts. That is ridiculous. That was supposed to be this team's thing, being good on the ground, except they lost Frank Ragnow now. So now we're not sure if that's going to be the case. And they also lost Ben Johnson. It's going to be tricky. This team, only 10% of their plays on Sunday gained 10 or more yards. They had a really hard time generating chunks, which we knew Ben Johnson brought that to the table. He's not around anymore. Who's to say if they can still do that? I know they just paid J-Mo, but maybe it's a lot more than just the guys you have on the field. Maybe it's about the design and what you're getting from the run game that allows for the passing game to be as explosive as it was. It's the reasons that the Lions offense was good in the past, those reasons, they were complex. There was a lot of things going on, and a lot of it tied to the floor here. That offensive line, the push they get on a play-by-play basis, and the ways that they were able to hide a lot of the weaknesses that Jared Goff has. Because we know that he's not the most well-rounded quarterback of all time, putting it nicely. Those things are all up in the air now. They could go any which way, and again, if we're just talking base level, answering the question, my take here, having that concern, they lost to a team in their own division, and I think that's very worrying when we remember what the Lions were last year. A 15-game winning team for the 1 seed in the NFC. I mean, a lot has changed, and it really hasn't been that much time that has passed, and that's alarming.
Yeah, I think concern is justified because the standard is so high. I have seen some people taking it way too far in my book. I've seen some people trying to take the Lions suck now angle, like Logan, you even mentioned the possibility of them missing the playoffs. Like, I still feel pretty confident the Lions are going to be a playoff team. But the standard is, okay, last year they won 15 games. They were the 1 seed, even with a defense that was decimated by the end of the year. The year before that, they won 12 games and they were on the verge of a Super Bowl appearance. Like, the standard has been set very, very high here. But I do think that this performance overall has a lot to do with the Packers, more to do with the Packers than the Lions. I am extremely high on Green Bay. I had them as my number 2 Super Bowl contender going into the year. I had them as my favorite in the NFC. This is a team that was already so good at so much, and then they added a Micah Parsons. I think the totality of this Green Bay defense is wildly impressive. They could be the best defense in the conference. I think they're going to be one of the elite defenses in football. Like, they just do so much so well in terms of scheme. Jeff Hafley is great. His willingness to create confusion, his willingness to move around Micah Parsons even in his debut. And there's a lot of talent up front here. Micah is obviously game-breaking, but Rashawn Gary was very good. Edgerrin Cooper is a playmaker. You've got Quay Walker. You've got Devontae Wyatt, all these guys living in the backfield. Like, yes, the Lions' offensive line has regressed. They lost Ragnow and Zeitler. We knew that. You can't write that off. Like, if you go from top 2 offensive line every year to slightly above average offensive line, and the most important part of your identity is we get 5 yards per carry at will, and the biggest reason for that is we dominate you up front, like, and that leads into everything else that makes your offense great. If you lose a chunk of that, of course that matters, but still think the Lions are going to be one of the better rushing attacks in football. They won't be what they have been the last couple years, but they're not going to play the Green Bay Packers every week. And then defensively, I'm actually not that concerned about the Lions' week 1 performance. I think they've got a lot of talent up front. I still believe deeply in that safety tandem. I think there's a lot of talent in the secondary and the linebacking court. This is a really talented football team. They lost talent, specifically on the offensive line, and they lost 2 really good football coaches. And I thought the offense did look more bland. And I think what Aaron Glenn was able to do last year, staying on his toes, right? Figuring out game plan to game plan, how are we going to make the most of the fact that they didn't have an Aiden Hutchinson, and then they didn't have Anzalone, and they didn't have Aleem McNeil. Like, they just kept piling up the injuries. Maybe you're not getting that from your coordinators this year. I certainly wouldn't expect you to, because Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn were elite. But even with average coordinators, even with the offensive line regression, you still got a good quarterback, limited, but a good regular season quarterback in Jared Goff. Elite offensive playmakers. Amon-Ra, J-Mo, Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, you can't overstate the amount of talent that is still in this offense. And then obviously you get to a Montgomery, and there's a lot of talent on this defense. So I just don't think the Lions are as good as the Packers. I didn't think the Lions were as good as the Packers going into the year. So this wasn't like a shocking result to me. Yes, it was bad. And you read off a couple of the numbers, Anthony. I compiled a whole bunch together because, like, This is the worst offensive game we've seen from the Lions in a long time. It was their fewest points in a game since 2023. It was their fewest yards per play as an offense in 4 years. It was their fewest rushing yards and fewest yards per rushing attempt in 2 years. It was their fewest net yards per passing attempt since week 8 of last year, and their most sacks taken since week 8 of last year. All of that stuff is concerning. And yet I think when you consider the context of the matchup, how great the opponent is, how many moving parts are in place right now, like, I don't think the Lions ever look worse than they did at this moment. I think it's going to be an upwards trend from here on out. They've got a tough schedule, and so they are going to be put in a position where, yeah, they have to figure stuff out against really good competition. They don't get to have the sort of runway where it's like, okay, week 1, we don't look our best, we're figuring stuff out, but we beat the Titans, so it's not a huge talking point. You go out there and you play a national TV game against the Packers and you get your ass handed to you. But I think it's going to get a lot better from here. I still think the Lions are a double-digit win team and a playoff team. But one of the upper echelon contenders, probably not. That upside is there. A lot of that is probably going to come down to coaching. And I agree. I wasn't impressed by John Morton. I thought the offense was pretty bland in week 1. And, Ben Johnson has set a very high bar there. So certainly something to monitor. But also, I just look around the NFC and it's like, okay, if the Lions do miss the playoffs, who's going to surpass them? Falcons, Bears, Cardinals. I look at these teams around who are outside looking in and I'm like, they're just not as talented as the Detroit Lions. And so I'm going to bet on talent here, even if it's not the same talent that it was last year. One more real or fake question for you guys. Anthony, we'll start with you. Real or fake, the Texans will be dethroned as AFC South champions this year. They, of course, take a week 1 loss to the Rams, and you got a couple of wins from teams in their division. The Jags and the Colts both pick up wins. Do you think that's real or fake?
Yeah, so I love this one, and I'm going to end with an overreaction. This one's got to be good.
Hell yeah.
I said earlier that, the right thing, the rational thing to do is look at past results and really try to assume that those things are going to stay solid for as long as possible. We were talking about that with the Dolphins and with the Texans. What we would be talking about is that defense, right? We know it's one of the best in football. But I said earlier, you have to be a little bit irrational if you're trying to make an actual prediction going forward for how things are going to go a lot of the time. And so I think it's real. I think that the Texans are not going to win this division by the year's end. And my irrational way of thinking about this is that I'm kind of tired of pretending that an elite defense is the exact same as an elite offense. I really don't think that those things are equal. I know what everybody would take 10 times out of 10 if it really came down to it, because a lot of this correlates to vibes. And even though the Texans have an elite defense, they have terrible vibes, and that's because their offense has struggled and struggled and struggled forever. And the thing that really rounds this all out is that there is a different team in this division, the Jacksonville Jaguars, that's got an offense that after 1 week, even with the Panthers tax, I think it's pretty exciting. I think their vibes are good. They have the handsomest coach in the NFL, as I've heard said on this podcast before.
Yes.
And it's funny because,
looking.
in the offseason, everyone was talking about this team has weird vibes. Liam Cohen, a little awkward. Trevor Lawrence, he's not the most charismatic.
I don't know if I would say awkward. He's maybe unique, but I think it's a
misunderstood. Yes.
Misunderstood by the masses, and now they're coming around.
Shane Waldron too. Shane Waldron, it didn't feel good in the offseason. I was like, I don't know what I'm thinking about this team, but now I'm thinking good things because I liked how they looked. I liked how put together they were, and I liked that their strength is offense compared to the Texans. That's really what I'm trying to get at here. And again, if we're tying all these takes together today, bringing it back to that whole Broncos versus Raiders discussion, this is the AFC we're talking about. You can take that defense wins playoff games, championships, whatever. Take that over to the NFC, where you've got teams like the Eagles and stuff. If you're not able to get around teams like the Ravens, who blew out the Texans last year, teams like the Bills, even a team like the Chiefs, who, mind you, beat the Texans last year in the playoffs, even with their very unremarkable offense over the course of the season, it's not going to work the same, I don't think. And I'm just really worried about how this quarterback, CJ Stroud, holds up over the course of the season. They had a 10% play action rate on Sunday, 35% motion rate, that's pretty low. It just didn't seem like there were many training wheels here, which would have been nice because CJ Stroud, he could use a break from time to time. And the lack of play action, I think that speaks to how worried they are about being able to have Stroud turn his back to the defense with how shaky that offensive line is. So the defense, their defense, it can be as good as you want to say it is. It might be a top 3-1 in the league. Maybe it's the best. But if that offense continues to look the way that it looked on Sunday, I do think another team overtakes them.
I'm with you. I just don't know which team it's going to be. I liked how the Jaguars looked. I thought finally the offense looked competent and confident, and Trevor Lawrence, I was really impressed with the offensive line. Now, I don't know if that had more to do with the Panthers having a stinky pass rush or if the Jags' offensive line is actually that good, but I thought they got pushed in the running game for Etienne. Etienne broke off a massive run in this game, and then I thought Lawrence had time back there. I cannot believe I'm saying this in the year of our Lord 2025. I'm rocking with Daniel Jones and the Colts.
No.
Dude, I was the most anti-Daniel Jones guy on the planet. The Colts have me feeling some type
Why
of way.
won't you just embrace the Jags? It's the Jags' year.
It might, dude, I like what I got from the Colts in week 1, man. They look good. I think I'm on the Indiana train, man. I think Daniel Jones, I think Shane Steichen has got a guy who can operate his offense. Tyler Warren and Michael Pittman, come on, man. You're not rocking with the Colts?
Well,
This just feels like an overreaction.
Defense.
This feels like the definition of a week 1 overreaction to me. To go from a team that you had winning, like 4 games preseason? They beat the team that you've now said is the worst in the AFC, and now they're winning the division? And I understand it was convincing, but the Dolphins also had an aneurysm on live television for 60 minutes on both sides of the ball. Listen, man, here's what I will say. I think preseason, I probably sold the Colts short. And even in the moment, I was like, maybe I'm giving them too much of a Daniel Jones tax because they already had some of the worst quarterback play in football, and they won 8 games last year. They're well coached. They're really good in the trenches. They do have some offensive skill position talent. I just really still don't trust the quarterback play, and I don't see them doing enough at a high level. Maybe it is just trench dominance, but no. Actually, still no. Maybe that can get them to 8 wins again. That's not going to get them to the playoffs. The Jags have offensive pop. The Jags have big-time offensive playmakers, and the Jags have a great offensive mind, and they have a much more talented quarterback. I'm just going to bet on that, especially because they have talent defensively. They've invested in the secondary. They've got, obviously, a couple of big-time talents in that pass rush up front. And I was in on the Jags big-time preseason. They were my pick to win this division. I feel better about that after week 1. I also was really concerned about the Texans in the preseason. I had them missing the playoffs, and the reason is the offensive line is such an abomination. And it's exactly what you said, Anthony. Their offensive game plan every single week, and I think it's going to be worse this year than ever before, is CJ, please save us. We've got nothing for you in the run game. We've got a thin receiving core. Our offensive line is the worst in football. You have to overcome a 40 to 50% pressure rate every week, and it's just too much. I really like CJ, but I think the job that they have given him is absolutely enormous. And I look at the Jags. I've got a couple stats for you that I think indicate how they are doing the exact opposite now under Liam Cohen. They are making life as easy on their talented players as possible, and they are putting them in positions to succeed. Trevor Lawrence was pressured 6 times in week 1. He had the lowest pressure rate of any quarterback in football. Travis Etienne had the 6th most yards before contact of any running back. He also had the 2nd most total yards after contact. But if you are putting your quarterback in a position where he is not pressured and you are getting push and you are getting significant amounts of yardage for your running back before they are touched.
All right, dude.
You've now
Are
made
you going
life
to get
easy
on me
your
for
whole
hyping
offense.
up the Colts after drubbing the Dolphins and the Jags drubbed the Panthers?
Because my take isn't changing on the Jags. I had the Jags winning 10 games in the division. I'm just staying in the same spot. You're doing a 180 on a team because they beat a shitty team. I'm just saying, hey, I saw what I expected from the Jags against the shitty team. But Liam Cohen is awesome, man. And I've said it before, this was the most underachieving team in football last year and arguably the worst coached. Now they've got a really good coach. My coach of the year pick too as well. So yes, I'm in on the Jags, but I've been in on the Jags. I'm not changing. I'm not doing an overreaction Tuesday. And I just thought you saw in this offense more motion, more creativity, more screens, much more effective run game, a concerted effort to get the ball in their playmakers' hands, screens for Brian Thomas Jr., screens for Travis Hunter. And I've honestly been baffled by the Trevor Lawrence discourse after this game. This is not something I expected to see. And maybe part of it was because I was searching for like a video of Liam Cohen so I could quote tweet it and talk about how handsome and attractive I found him. But like I looked up Liam Cohen, everything was just shitting on Trevor Lawrence, which having watched a significant amount of that game and then rewatched it, like I don't understand. He missed a couple throws. Accuracy is the thing with him, right? He just has to be more consistent there. It was a problem last year. But I thought he controlled the game well. I thought for the most part, he executed the offense. He made a couple nice tight window throws, but he got the ball where it needed to go with just a couple exceptions. And the offense was very effective, especially in the first half. They were humming. They put up 20 points. And I think that speaks to the fact that I do think we're going to see a Trevor Lawrence resurgence this year and a revival, but it's not necessarily because in a vacuum, Trevor Lawrence is just going to get so much better. Every quarterback is a product of his circumstances. This is how we have these wild swings where, oh my God, this year this guy sucks and this year this guy's top 10. Realistically, that's not what happened. He went from a bad offensive situation to a good one. That's exactly what I think is happening with Trevor Lawrence, with better playmakers in this offense now, with a way better play caller. And I just think they have the best formula. And I would still take the Texans formula over the Colts, even though I don't like the Texans formula because it puts so much on CJ. Elite defense and good quarterback, that can win you enough games. That's how, even though they were 24th in points per drive last year, they were good enough to get to the playoffs and win one game. I don't think it's sustainable, but it's more sustainable than Daniel Jones, in my opinion.
Nah, I'm just actually just moved by how bad Houston's offensive line play was. CJ had, I think, the third worst pressure rate of any starting quarterback in week one.
I told you it was going to be the worst offensive line in football. You can't be worse than the worst.
41% in week one. He was the most pressured quarterback in football last year at 28%. So it's like, no, this is – I just want to be clear about my take here. I think the Texans are going to win like 7 to 8 games, but I think the Colts and Jaguars will both win more games than them because of how bad that offensive line is. I think this offense is going to be bad, not because of CJ, not because it's because of the offensive line. It is really that simple. So I'm out on Houston being able to move the ball.
This is so interesting, Logan, because these are all the things that I said before the year. And when I say them, you don't listen. But now I guess you see it in week one, and all of a sudden it's the whole world. Here's the one thing I will say. I mean, their offensive line is abysmal. I do think it's the worst in football. They also just faced one of the absolute best pass rushes. I mean, going up against that Rams pass rush week one, that is about as tough of a draw as you can
and
get.
The Texans almost still did win that game if Landman doesn't punch that ball out. Like, I think the Texans are going to be competitive, but I just thought the offensive line was going to look somewhat better than last year, and it didn't. They looked like dog shit again. They're cooked. The Texans line is cooked. They can't run the ball. C.J. Stroud is running like a chicken with his head cut off. I just think it's too much for him to overcome.
Anthony, where do you fall on the Colts line of this? Because, my hierarchy preseason in this division was Jags at the top, then the Texans, and then a gap for the Colts. And now Logan's doing this whole jumble where he's got the Colts on top. Do you think that's crazy? Do you think that's reasonable? Where are you with Indiana Jones and the boys?
So I say it's reasonable. I still have the Jaguars first, but I look at Shane Steichen and I think about, this is a guy who went 9-8 with Gardner Minshew 2 years ago. And so I feel like he can do enough with that offense. But the thing that I'm really drawn to with the Colts, and it's really hard to parse this out after 1 week because you played Tua turn the ball over, but Big Lou Anarumo on defense, he can get creative, and I think that defense has a lot of talent. I really like their group up front. I really like Cam Bynum. I love that addition. I love his sellies that he hits and stuff. Legend. I think that they can make most games unpleasant for other people, regardless of the offense of it all. And I do feel like Daniel Jones with his legs, maybe with this confidence, I don't know if it's confidence, it's only been one game. Maybe it was his 2 conversations he had with Kevin O'Connell that changed him for the better. But he does look a little bit different. I think it's enough for Shane Steichen to work with. I think that offense can be pretty neat overall. And I do think the defense, of all things, will actually kind of be the anchor of a team that I expect to be solid. I do think that's a reasonable take. And again, if we're tying this back to the Texans, I just think about how solid this defense is, the Colts defense, how solid the Titans defense looked against the Broncos. And, the Jags, I don't think it's that bad. I just think all of these teams in division, their defenses, they're going to do C.J. Stroud no favors. I don't think he's going to catch a break in any of these division games. I think he's going to be fighting for his life at least those, 6 times of the year that he's got to play him. And that's not a good omen. I don't think that's not good.
They're going to be fighting an uphill battle. I mean, this has been my take with the Texans. The points for them come hard. They have to work hard to score, specifically CJ. Points for the Jags were coming easy. Yes, you're facing the Panthers, who I think are one of the worst defenses in football. But when the scheme looks that effective and when the talent is just there, there's a lot of talent on this Jags team that was previously just squandered, wasted. And now I think we're seeing them get a lot more juice out of what they've had on paper. And Liam Cohen is the biggest reason for that. Logan?
I was just going to say, man, God bless Liam Cohen. Did you see how happy the Jags owner was in the locker room after? Dude, Liam Cohen looked like he might have saved football in Jacksonville.
He is. He's the savior. He is the savior. Oh, what a stud.
The Lisan Al-Gaib?
He is the Lisan Al-Gaib, and he's the Muad'Dib, and he's the Mahdi, and he's the Quetzal Haderach. And that's just the way it is. Anthony, thank you so much for coming on, my friend. What a joy it was to have you. Everybody go check out his content everywhere. Truly, I cannot recommend it highly enough. Some of the best TikTok football analysis that you will see. I mean, you were grinding on game day. I saw you posted, I don't know how many videos, 100 maybe, probably something like that. So all of them of a very high quality. And my favorite Anthony content now is the YouTube stuff. I just think you do phenomenal long form stuff on YouTube. Very philosophical about a lot of sports issues, a lot of big picture stuff that I think is really, really well done and really interesting. So everybody go support him. Go check out his stuff. You'll learn a little something. You'll get a little smarter. You'll have a good time. And if you don't, you got beef with me, Liam Cohen, head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Is there anything else you want to plug? Anything else you want to say before we let you get out of here?
Nothing else to plug. I want to thank you for those incredibly kind words. I'm a big Nerd Sesh fan over here, so it means a lot coming from you, and I'll say they're coming from you too, Logan. So thank you guys both. I was really honored to be on this podcast. This was a lot of fun. And yeah, I was grinding on game day. I'm really excited to be putting work in this football season on all my platforms. Hashtag rent due. Got a lot of stuff. So
yeah, you got that New York City rent now. That's not going to be fun. But I got that San Francisco rent, buddy, so I know how it is. Trust me. This is all we have. Real. I mean, Logan, we're putting food on the table. I'm putting bread on your table. For you, it's not so much a table. I slide a trough underneath, and it's not actually bread. It's gruel. But nevertheless, I got to find some way to buy that from the local
It's like a tray through the little slot in my door.
Yeah, of course, I don't pay him in money. I pay him in beans, but I got to find some way to get enough, chickens to trade for the beans.
Boy, do I love my beans, though.
And that's the creator economy for you. If you guys want more of our stuff, you know where to find us. YouTube. You can find all of our full episodes. You can find some of our video essay content and all of our trivia stuff, NBA, NFL. You know where it is. Social, you can find us everywhere. You can listen to the pod across all audio platforms. But your top priority is go follow Anthony Lawson on YouTube, Anthony Esquire on TikTok, correct? Is that correct?
I was trying to unmute. ESQ Anthony is what it is. Esquire Anthony is the Twitter handle, though. But yeah.
Bingo, bango, bongo. And with that, as always, we appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And I've been Anthony Lawson.
And this was Nerd Sesh.